I don't really know how to explain what happened to me just a few weeks ago, but I will try my best to share it in a way that lets you understand from my perspective, that makes it make sense or as much sense as it possibly can anyway. Please bear with me because my brain is still a little bit scrambled and I am trying to put the pieces of my life and my brain back together because this event still has me a little bit shaken up. I guess I should start where it all went wrong, which is when I boarded my flight from Toronto to Nevada. I think it was supposed to be around a 5-hour flight, give or take, and it was bright and early in the morning when I boarded. I can't remember the exact time, but I remember that after waiting in the airport for hours and going through security, the sun was just starting to rise in the sky once we were boarding. The flight was not for anything crazy. I worked and still do work as a freelance journalist, and I was over there for an interview about something that I'm not sure if I should mention. I won't mention the name of the person that I was interviewing, but I was interviewing someone in the police force, quite high up, about some major crimes in the area going under the radar recently and being brought to the public light, and also about this new technology police were trialing and thinking about implementing to help track criminals and piece together bits of evidence and also identify people for dead trails. Something to do with utilizing AI software or some other stuff. It's pretty much in its infancy, but I think there's plans to invest more money or something in it. I'm not completely sure. I was writing a piece on how harmful it would be, especially for something so new and untested. It was bound to make mistakes and cause a lot of innocent people to be caught in the crossfire, and either have their lives ruined, or they would be shaken up and scarred by it. I was invited for the interview to try and kind of change my mind, I guess, and I was going there because I figured reporting on it was a good thing to do. Trust in the police has already been going down rapidly the last decade or so, and I was of the opinion that this would only accelerate that viewpoint to wider society and reduce trust even further. Even before I got on that plane, things were weird, and I had a really rough start to my day. It seemed like nearly everyone going through security at a similar time as me were being stopped and pulled aside and taken to a small room to be searched in private and to be interviewed. Come to think of it, I recognized at least a handful of those same people on my very same flight. It could have just been coincidence, but I have absolutely no idea. I was told that I needed to step aside for a search, and when I asked why, I was told that they had found something anomalous, is what they said, in my bag. When I asked for clarification on what kind of anomalous thing that it was, they told me not to worry, that there was probably just something metal in my bag sending the sensors haywire. A hairdryer or something that's triggering the alarm and being detected as something else. But that was not possible. It was not going to be a long stay for me since it was only a business trip and a short one at that, and so I only had clothing with me in my bag. My phone and my credit cards and etc. were out of my bag. They told me that they had to search me, otherwise I would be refused on the flight. The search was one thing, but what they did was another thing entirely. There were two males who searched me. One looked like your usual run-of-the-mill airport security guy, but the other one, he was wearing these surgical gloves and a face mask, and was wearing an outfit that made him look more like a dentist than security, really. The security guy searched me normally, but the other guy had cotton swabs, and he had them out and was holding them, and he was running these cotton swabs over my shoes, over my clothing, and he even asked to check my fingernails and to take a swab from my mouth. I told him no, and that this was not lawful. He gave me some bullshit spiel about how it was a new law that had just come in, and that it was just to check for traces of drugs. They told me that I could legally refuse, but that if I had nothing to hide, it would be better to do it and not risk missing my flight. That last part seemed more like a threat than anything else. I complied because I only had one chance for this interview, and I did not want to miss out on it, and on the money that I would receive for the article. I know whatever spiel they gave me was wrong, but I had no choice. I kind of needed this. I don't know how long the searching took, but it was quite a while. Once I finally boarded the flight, I thought that everything would just be plain sailing from there. I figured that some weird asshole at the airport had just had a bad day and decided to power trip to make himself feel better. I wasn't rich enough to afford business class, but if I'm honest, economy class has never really bothered me since I'm on the shorter side. Not only that, but this was one of those really shitty cheap airlines that only have an economy class cabin and no business class at all. I can't remember the name of the airline though. I was strapped into the aisle seat, and I was closing my eyes, preparing to just have a nap. All of the pre-flight stuff went okay, and it was not long before we were shooting down the runway, and then we were up in the air. Everything went completely fine and as expected for quite a while, and I was just resting my eyes. But after a while, we suddenly hit some really horrible turbulence that jolted me awake. It was like nothing I had ever felt before. It felt like something heavy had suddenly just started weighing down the backside of the plane, shortly followed by the nose of the plane jolting forwards and downwards. The pilot or whoever came over the intercom and apologized for the turbulence. He started talking about potential storms in the area causing interference, and then he just kind of trailed off mid-sentence, and then all of a sudden, the intercom just started becoming all staticky and cutting out here and there. He kept on trying to talk, but it did not work. And all of a sudden, this horrible, high-pitched whining sound just started blaring all throughout the plane, and this annoying kid who was sitting behind me the entire time started crying and kicking the back of my seat while begging his mom and dad to get them to shut it off. The intercom speakers continued with this horrible whine for around 5 seconds or so, but in that time, I suddenly got this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. It made me feel like my stomach had just dropped down to the ground and become a bottomless well. It felt like dread was swirling and pooling in the bottom. It was such a weird and horrible feeling. After the 5 seconds of static, the intercom seemingly went back to normal, and I could hear someone speaking again. Only, the person speaking over the intercom now was not the pilot. It was not the same man as before. The voice sounded different, not human, I would even go as far as to say. It sounded like someone with phlegm caught in their throat, gargling it while tapping on their throat again and again to almost modulate it. The voice had this weird layering to it that, I don't know, it just sounded so strange. I have no idea what the voice was saying at all. It only spoke for a few seconds and then that was it. Just pure silence. The guy at the window seat of my row was freaking out, big time. He wasn't the only one either. He had his face pretty much glued to the window. I looked over, and I noticed it too. There was something really seriously wrong with the sky. Just a minute ago, the sky was really bright, and the weather was perfectly fine, but now, the sky was almost pitch black. And there were these gray clouds that made it almost impossible to see anything around us. And there was something else there too. I could see something in the middle of the sky, just ever so faintly. It was hard to make out, but I could see something almost shimmering. I couldn't see an actual physical object, but it was like there was something completely translucent just floating in the sky alongside us. I could not see it, and I could only see through it, but if I looked close enough and paid enough attention, I could almost see the outline of this shimmer, if that makes sense at all. I actually saw it flicker, but only for a second. It flashed solid for just a split second before reverting back to just being see-through. I could not make out much since it was so quick, but it looked like another plane or aircraft of some kind, but not like any I had ever seen before. It was like if you took a Boeing plane but removed the wings, compressed it slightly at both ends, and then And then I don't know. I do not remember what else I saw. All I remember is that when I saw it flicker solid, it was closer to the plane than when I first saw the outline. And then all of a sudden, I just felt this massive jolt, and the plane felt like it was going to fall out of the sky. I saw things in the plane go flying into the air, and I even saw a man fall out of his seat and onto the floor. When I looked outside the window again, I could see that the outline of this thing, the outline of this shimmer, was basically side by side with the plane by now. The intercom came over again, but it was just the pilot, and he was not making any sense at all. He actually sounded like he was drunk and just rambling about nonsense, about people getting down and hiding and etc. Everything was just in complete chaos by this point. Everyone was scared and screaming and scrambling around, but there was nowhere for anyone to go. There was nothing anyone could really do. There were several more jolts where it felt like the plane was tipping over and all of the oxygen masks fell down from the ceiling. I couldn't even reach for mine because the plane kept turning and taking it out of my grasp. The plane rocked a few more times until I had absolutely no idea what was going on anymore, until I had no idea which way was up and which way was down. I remember seeing that there was something leaking out of the pilot's cabin right in front of me. It was some kind of gas or something. Whatever it was thick and white and was clouding up at the top of the cabin, like a fog of some kind that meant that I could only really see the lower half of the plane. The gas was, I'm not sure. It was having some kind of weird effect on my body. I was coughing, and then my body started to feel, I don't know, lighter somehow. My brain was starting to feel really fuzzy, and the rest of my body was becoming heavier and heavier by the second, to the point that it was taking me so much effort just to move my arms or even move my head around. It was like the gravity had been turned up a couple of notches. Other people by now had stopped screaming. People were now either coughing or slumped over in their seats or falling down onto the ground. My eyes were becoming heavy now, too, and it was taking all of my concentration just to keep them open. I remember at this point, the door to the pilot's cabin swung open, but it was like all of the sound of the world had just been muted. And inside the pilot's cabin did not look like it should anymore. I could not see any of the flight stuff or the consoles. The door now looked like it opened up into an impossibly large room that was pretty dark, pretty much pitch black, like a void. This thing walked out of there, and there was no sign of the pilot anymore. I could not see all of this thing because of that smoke, but I could make out parts of it, just bits and pieces. There were actually multiple of these things walking down the aisle of the plane. They were shaped kind of like a human, but their knees kind of jutted out, almost into a spike. Like there was something pointy jutting out where the kneecap would be, and their legs looked almost bent backwards, and they were slightly further back. Their elbows had this same jut, and their skin was this almost silvery metallic kind of color. And on various points of their bodies, the skin looked quite scaly and coarse, despite this metallic look, and it looked as if the skin had these bumps and marks, almost like ridges. And then they were grabbing people. They started grabbing people off of the plane. I saw one of these things rip an oxygen mask off of a grown man, and then he grabbed the man by his face with his scaly hands and just held it there. Doing, I don't know what, holding his face and putting pressure on it. And it did this until the man eventually just went limp. Seriously, this thing just had its fingers and palm wrapped around the front of his face for a few seconds, and then boom, that was it. After this, it looked like he actually put something on this man, something that looked white. It almost looked like bone, I would say, which I could not really see at this point, but when one of the things got closer, that's when I could make it out. But bone is like the only thing I can describe, that I can compare it to, that it actually looked like. The smoke was starting to clear up, so as the seconds ticked by, I could actually make out more and more. This bone mask type thing, it seemed to curve at the bottom, and this thing actually inserted it into the passed out man's nose, and then it also covered the ridge of the man's nose, and looked like it fastened around his mouth and then blocked it. After this, the thing dragged the man out of his seat and pulled him down the aisle into the pilot's cabin, and after that, they just disappeared into the darkness. I know it sounds insane and like complete and utter bullshit, but I swear that I saw this happen with my own 2 eyes, and I was not dreaming or on any drugs. I know this happened. I could not believe my eyes at the time either. These things were cutting down all of the oxygen masks from the ceiling and removing them from the people who actually managed to get them on and did not pass out. They just seemed to swipe their arms near them, near where the cord was, and all of a sudden, they had been cut loose. I had no idea how they even did it. I did not see anything sharp on their bodies, especially not on their arms. This just kept on happening. Anyone with an oxygen mask on was being grabbed and pulled away into that pilot's cabin. One of these went wrong though. This thing actually walked past me down the aisle. It made eye contact with me. The eyes were just this searing orange color. There was a pupil in the middle that was a white kind of color, but the rest of the eyeball looked like a dim orange, like an autumn leaf. This thing was touching everyone by the neck as it walked by, and it touched me for a second before grabbing me and then letting go. It felt like it was putting its fingers near where you could feel my pulse, and the pressure that I felt just from a touch of its hands was massive. Like, my neck felt like it was being pinned down by something heavy, and I could not get any breath for a few seconds. But this thing was not grabbing me. It was barely even touching me. It just had a couple of fingers running across me, pressing down. It tilted its head sideways at me and made this sound like a kind of a weird guttural snarl, and then it closed its fingers around my throat, and I really thought that was it. I thought that I was going to die right then and there, or at the very least, be dragged off into that nothingness. But one of the other things right behind it shoved it in the back, and it jerked forward. I'm just glad that the thing let go of my neck when it did. The one that grabbed me looked backwards, and the other one just seemed to shake its head. At least, that's what I remember it doing. Then it continued walking down the aisle, before stopping at the row behind me with the kid. When the thing passed by me and behind me, I felt that kicking on the back of my chair starting back up once again, and then I heard more grunting coming from that thing. Maybe a couple of minutes went by, I don't know. I could not really tell how much or how little time was actually passing. Also, by the way, I thought I should mention, I could hear like voices, those things making noise, that kind of thing. Sound wasn't completely muted anymore, but it seemed different, compressed, like it wasn't full volume, or I don't know, like I was missing something when I heard it. But then after this, I saw the man being dragged along the floor by just one hand of this thing, by his head I think, or his throat, somewhere around there. And then the next thing that happened, it made me even more scared for my life. I didn't even think that was possible. I thought I was at the maximum at that point. The man was being dragged down the aisle, and all of a sudden, I see this kid jump up to his feet and run after his father. The kid tried to punch and kick at this thing, but it was like when the kid tried to grab it, the thing just became incorporeal. I remember the kid fell down onto his ass, and then he just got up and jumped onto his father's chest to try and stop him from being dragged off. There were two of these things there, one of them behind the kid, and the other one dragging off the father. The one behind tried desperately to grab at this kid, but he could not get him in time, and the one doing the dragging put out one outstretched palm to try and stop him, but he could not reach over all the way. The kid landed on his father anyway, and then I heard this sickening crack. It all happened so quickly, I was not even sure of what I was really seeing. I remember seeing the kid being dragged off, and then I saw the man on the ground. I saw that he had some kind of hole inside his face. His face literally looked flattened or caved in. That should have been impossible. Something like that should have taken an insane amount of force, but this thing did it with one hand, entirely by accident. I think it was an accident anyway, because I saw the thing's face change. It looked like it was shocked now instead of angry or just neutral. I saw the thing let go of the father on the floor and then take a step back while grabbing its face and just shaking its head again and again. The other thing grabbed the kid from behind and grabbed the kid's face until he passed out. Then that thing came back, and I don't know if they argued or what. The one in front almost looked like it was crying. I could see its eyes had become a bit of a shinier orange, and I could see something leaking from its eyes. Maybe it wasn't crying. Maybe these things don't cry. I don't know, but that's what it looked like to me. The one behind was pointing at the body on the floor and looked like it was saying something, but I could not hear any of it. Even if I could, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what they said. I saw both of them drop to the floor and close their eyes. They looked as if they were talking while having their eyes shut, and they were in this weird half-squatting pose and had one hand holding the body, and then their other hand was holding the other one of them. After this, they grabbed the body and they dragged it off into the pilot's cabin just the same as the rest of them. And that is about where my memory really truly ends. I think I passed out at this point. I felt my heart going a mile a minute, and then my vision just kind of went black. When I woke back up again, the sun was actually out in the sky again. All of those clouds had cleared. There was no kind of interference or anything at all. Everything just seemed normal. And the pilot even came back through on the intercom again. Completely normal sounding. Kind of normal anyway. He was telling us that we were just about to land, and he was apologizing for the delay. He sounded kind of freaked out. Everyone on that plane was on edge. Nobody really talked. There was still a lot of silence, pretty much up until we landed. There was a horrible smell in the air. It smelled like gasoline mixed with food that had gone bad. I could also see that there was a dark stain on the floor that looked like it had been smeared down the aisle. When we finally landed, things did not get better from there. There were vehicles waiting for us on the tarmac, and some police officers or something came actually onto the plane and escorted people off of it. The explanation was that the turbulence had caused damage and that we all needed medical attention just in case, as protocol. There were more officers there than I had ever seen before in my entire life. Only, they were all dressed in plain clothes. I know that you're going to tell me that I'm lying and that there was no way I could have known that they were officers, but I just knew. It was obvious. There was no way they would have been there or had any power if they weren't. Or if they were not some kind of law enforcement, something in that vein. People were being escorted off of the plane every which way, and I noticed that there were people missing from the plane. There were plenty of empty seats, whereas before, the plane was stuffed full. Those people were actually gone. I realized then that it was not some kind of horrible, messed up nightmare. It was actually real. I was escorted into a tiny little room, just the same as the first time on the way there, and there was both a medic and an officer waiting for me. I had my blood taken. They even checked my pulse too, and some other things, while the officer asked me about the flight, telling me he hoped it was not too bothersome and that the authorities were going to rectify the negligence that we had suffered. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I guess he was trying to play off everything as a mistake on the part of the people who checked the fuel and the integrity of the plane before takeoff and all of the pre-flight checks. I think he was trying to tell me that that was the reason for the horrible turbulence, but that didn't really make any sense at all. I don't know if he just thought that I had no idea how a plane worked and just rattled off anything. I was told that I would be entitled to compensation and a full refund of the flight. What's crazy, and I know you're going to point this out, is I did not even think to object to any of the medical stuff. I was still so out of it that I just went along with it. I mean, heck, why would they ever need to take blood for a little bit of turbulence on a plane if that was the actual true story? That didn't make any sense at all. But I just nodded along, and I did every single thing that was asked of me. My head was still in that really fuzzy state, and my body was all still tingly and weightless and all messed up. And so I just didn't have the fight to say no, I don't want to do that. Nothing really all that much came of everything after that. I never saw any of those people ever again. I did actually receive some money eventually in compensation, but it was not an amount that would have changed my life. That was not the only thing either though. I found out that my plane was almost 24 hours late. That was impossible. There would not have been enough fuel for us to stay in the sky for that long. And surely someone would have tried checking on us, or there would have been some kind of a news report. It would have been so high profile, but no, there was nothing. I was told multiple times that I must have been mistaken on my flight times and that we were only around an hour delayed. When I showed my tickets, I was told that it must have been a printing error. And so I busted out my phone and I showed them my digital tickets, and I was told that it was just a glitch in the system, and the staff member swiveled her monitor around and showed me the correct times. I know that was not possible. Those fuckers must have changed the system and updated the times. I have absolutely no idea what happened to me to this day. I don't think I ever will, but honestly, it still really messes me up. Every time I close my eyes, I am trapped in that plane once again. I've been having nightmares of seeing one of those things walking down the aisle towards me on a completely empty plane with no one around. It's just heading straight for me and only me. And the nightmare always ends with this thing grabbing me by the face and my vision going completely dark. I wish that I was making all of this up. I wish that this was not real. Obviously, that interview with the police never happened because I didn't show up at all. I tried to call up afterwards about it and they told me it was not possible to have another interview, that the person in question could not spare any more time and had important work to do. It took a lot of pestering and nagging, but I did manage to get the guy on the phone, actually on the phone with me. And when I was speaking to him, he didn't really seem angry or confused or anything. Actually, he didn't even ask me why I did not show up. He just stressed that he did not have the time, and that was it. The call was passed back over, and then it was ended rather quickly.